Hi, I'm Liselle and welcome back to my channel where I talk about all things writing, traditional publishing, and a little bit of reading. And today is the 2026 writing projects and plans update. This is where I basically talk about the projects that I'm going to be working on this year, ones that I was already working on last year that I'm continuing to work on in 2026, and also some new projects that I'm going to be working on in 2026. So this is a great video to kind of get an overview of my proposed plans for the year. And so I do this one in the beginning of the year, and then I also do a midpoint check-in in the middle of the year. And so that is what this video is all about. So let's go ahead and just jump in. Let's start with talking about my ongoing projects. So these are projects that I was already working on in 2025 and I'm just continuing to work on this year. So the first project I'm going to talk about is A Clash of Carnivores, which is the second book in the A Mastery of Monsters series. A Mastery of Monsters is my young adult dark academia fantasy. We follow a girl named August whose life is kind of on a purposeful downward spiral, and when her brother goes missing and she suspects that a secret society on campus is involved in his disappearance, she decides to infiltrate their ranks and try and find her brother. But the only way for her to get in is to team up with a boy who is literal months away from becoming a flesh-eating monster, and they have to compete in a series of deadly trials, basically to try and essentially win his humanity. But in the meantime, she's really focused on just kind of finding her brother and getting out. But she finds that it might not be as easy to get out once she gets herself in. And so it's set at my alma mater, Queen's University, in a world in which monsters exist. So yeah, so it's basically a contemporary fantasy at that point. But yeah, very dark academia, talking about, you know, privilege and that sort of thing, but also like a very fun, deadly competition sort of dynamic, slow burn romance, that whole thing. So that was the first book, A Mastery of Monsters. And so the second book, which will be coming out in August, yes, at the beginning of August, is yeah, the second installment. More competitions, more romance drama. I've also added a new perspective, a new point of view character. So it's all very exciting. So where I'm at with this project is right now I am working on the past pages. So those are basically the proofread pages of the book in its final form, what it's going to look like as a final book. And so I'm basically reading through and just making little changes so that I can be happy with what will go to print, because the final proof that we put together is going to be the one that's going to be the printed book. So that's what I'm working on right now. And I am changing a little bit more than I think. I find that like when I get to the past pages point, I either am like, yeah, amazing, or more often and more likely I'm like, wow, is this actually terrible? Should I throw this away? Can I restart? And that's kind of where I'm at with this. I'm kind of in a little bit of a panic and like, oh my gosh, should I rewrite this whole thing? Is this actually trash? And I know it's not, because this is my process and I do this every single time. Except for, I think, in the case of like A Mastery of Monsters and maybe Delicious Monsters, maybe those two, I think I was maybe okay at this point, but I honestly can't remember, so maybe I wasn't. But I do know in my heart of hearts that it is good. And that is a good book. I know that within my soul. But yeah, it's still a little bit rough to kind of process that. So yeah, that is Clash of Carnivores. I'm very nearly done though. This is like kind of the last stage. Usually I would have like had this done the year before, but it's just the way scheduling worked out, I didn't quite get to do it. But overall, I do feel like, I know in my heart of hearts that this is a very good sequel. I feel like it builds really well on what came in the first book. I also, because this is such a giant world, I feel like I had to do a lot of explaining in the first book, and now I can kind of like pull it back and like really have fun with the characters, which is the benefit of a sequel. Is like at that point you've established your world, and so you're just building on it, and so it's nice to not have to spend as much time like establishing everything. But yeah, I think this one is gonna be cool. There's a lot of like really cool like fight scenes and battle scenes and tension, and yeah, just like very happy with this sequel, even though I'm freaking out as I do past pages. But I know once it is done, everything will be okay. The next project is the third book in the A Mastery of Monsters trilogy. So the third and final book, which I am already working on. And I am in the process of doing the first draft of this book. The title hasn't been revealed yet, which is why I'm not saying it, but I'm working on the first draft of this book. I'm very, very nearly done. But my gosh, this book has been a process. It's been a process. I think it's just, you know, it's my first time writing a trilogy finisher. It's my first time writing a trilogy period. And so I think it's a little bit more difficult to kind of pull everything together. And I feel like I've set up so many threads throughout this series, and now I'm having to gather them all together. And I feel like I'm like frantically like you know, like when you have like a really long extension cord or like Christmas lights or something like that, I feel like I'm frantically trying to unravel everything and like panicking. And so this first draft has been a rough ride. It's also been, I've been working on this and writing this while in the process of having like a little bit of a difficult year in that latter bit of 2025, and then I was moving and then having to do all of that stuff, and I think it's just made the process of what is already a difficult book even more difficult. But yeah, so I'm still working on the first draft. As of the time I'm filming this video, I've not finished. And I don't think as of the time of posting this video I will have been finished either. So I'm still working on this first draft. I think the skeleton of this book is very good. I feel like I'm hitting on all of the points that I wanted to hit on plot-wise for this sequel. Like I think I'm getting to all of the points that I want. And so I think that skeleton and that base is really strong, and I like the way that that's set up and structured. I think what's really suffering is the logistics of how everything is happening and the character journeys, the character relationships. I definitely feel like this first draft is like I'm just trying to get everybody in their places. Like I feel like there's like a stage set and I'm just trying to move everyone around to where they need to be, and I'm not yet kind of giving them a chance to, you know, act out in a way, if that makes sense. I feel like it's so much like the stage dressing, like I'm just trying to make sure that everything is in the places it needs to be, and I think I won't get to like actually properly flesh out the journeys and the logistics pretty much until that next draft, which is rough for me in doing a first draft. But I also think that's kind of the process of doing a first draft, is that I can't do everything. I cannot hit on everything in the first draft. That's why I need edits. And so I'm just kind of focusing on, I just need to get it done and I just need to have everything in place, and then I can fix things later on. And so that's kind of what I'm working on right now. But I do think what is coming across well is the character voices. I think because now I've done two previous books with all of these characters, I feel like I'm really familiar with their voice and their attitude and their personality. And so when I write them, I feel like they come across exactly as they're meant to, because I'm so used to writing them at this point. It's just kind of like the arcs of their stories not doing so well. So my first deadline for that is February 1st, and then I will probably, I assume, continue to work on this book throughout the year. Yeah, but I'm definitely at that point where I'm like, no more series for a bit. And I say that, and then I'm going to talk about something at the end of this video that proves that I am the worst for this. But it always gets to this point where I've done a full series that I want to escape it and I want to do standalones, and then when I've done standalones for a bit, I'm like, actually, you know what, I have a great idea for a series. So it's just the eternal way that I'm doing this. But I am very glad career-wise that I've always, like, that so far I've always given myself a break to do standalones before I do more series. I do think that's very necessary for me. So that is yeah, that's that. And the last ongoing project that I will be working on in 2026 is what I'm calling #SlugBook, which is my weird little adult horror. It's about a alternate Toronto in which slugs have become an important commodity, and we're following a woman whose job is sort of in contention with the existence of slugs, and there is a murder, there is a serial killer, she's teaming up with an influencer. That's kind of the gist of it, as much as I can say. So that project, I have finished a first draft, so I do have a first draft done. I really did have more hopes of getting more done on it in 2025, but just the amount of things that I had going on, both in personal life and in professional life, just didn't give me as much time to work on it as I wanted to. But I do have notes back from my agent about that draft that I sent. So I did a first draft, and then I did like a self-edited draft, and then I sent it to my agent and I got back. So I do have notes from her. So my plan is to, because I haven't worked on it for so long, when I get a chance to work on the book, is to do a really thorough read through of the whole thing and to take really thorough notes, to combine and look at those together with my agent's notes, and to do a really like strong edit of it. I think really most of what the editing is and what my agent from my memory had talked about was more kind of character and like also trying to clarify what message I'm trying to put forward with the book, and then with the characters kind of creating that human element that can help connect the reader to their stories, because they're kind of like, they're not necessarily likable characters. And so kind of giving something that the reader can connect with, so that even if they're not like necessarily a likable character, there is something that you can kind of recognize in yourself, and kind of pulling that together. So I think that'll be really good. So just kind of doing that. And it is, to my memory, pretty short, so I do want to beef it up a little bit, but I think, knowing me, I will naturally beef it up when I do any edit, so I'm certainly not going to go into it with the mindset of like adding words, because it'll just explode. And when I'm working on like, you know, with like an adult horror thriller, working on those projects, I really want to keep that to a shorter word count. I would love so much to keep that to a shorter word count, especially because when I do fantasy, the word count is so large, and working on those sorts of projects simultaneously, like I cannot have them both be giant word count projects. So I do want to keep that kind of in there. And I mean, ideally, I would have liked to have gotten this project on submission in January, but I realized pretty quickly that was not going to happen. So I think my new goal is like June or like summer. That would be great. And I know sometimes people are like, oh, don't put things on submission or query or whatever during summer. I'm of the opinion to just do it at any time. Just put out your project at any time, because editors will literally always be busy. So I just feel like there's never any sort of perfect time. I think right before holidays is a little dicey. Like I probably wouldn't do in December, but I just think kind of anytime is anytime. So that's kind of my feeling, and my goal for it is to try and have it submission ready for June, because as usual in my career writer life, I do need to sell something this year to live. So that's kind of my hope and my goal for it, is to be able to get that submission ready. And I do think it'll probably take like maybe 2 more edits to get it to that point. Like I think 1 big edit and 1 sort of more line level nitpicky edit, and I think we'll be good to go. So yeah, I'm very excited about that project. It is just my weird little book, and I am really proud of it. I think it is one of those books where I just feel like, you know, sometimes people worry about like a book that stands out or original ideas or things like that, and I just feel like this is the sort of book where I cannot think of anyone else conceptualizing this as a story, because it's so weird, but I love it, and so I'm very excited about hopefully getting that into submission shape and being able to send that out. Now I'm going to talk about new in 2026 projects. So these are projects I would like to start new in 2026, hopefully, fingers crossed. And so I only have one project in here, and the project is an adult romantasy. So I would really like to put together a sort of extended adult romantasy proposal. This is what I would like to put together. So a proposal, if you don't know, for traditional publishing is usually a pitch letter, a full synopsis of the book, and then the first like 50 pages. But what I am wanting to do, because I'm aware that probably there are a lot of romantasy pitches going into the world, but I do have a background in fantasy and writing fantasy, and so I also feel kind of career-wise that I don't know that I would have to write a full book. I think horror and thriller, especially because I've been doing more sort of realistic horror and thriller in adult, I think that was different, and so that's why for the SlugBook, well, the SlugBook is just so off the wall that I knew I had to write the full book. And then other books I've gone on submission with just because it was a more realistic type thing, and so it wasn't quite one-to-one as my fantasy, and so I really felt like I needed to write the full book. But I feel like coming from a fantasy background, like really my adult romantasy would not be so far away from the young adult fantasy romance fantasy with romance elements that I have out in the world. And so I feel like I should be able to do a proposal, but I do want to do more of an extended proposal to kind of give publishers more material to work with. And so my feeling is that I'd like to do 200 pages as the sample. So that's kind of good, because for me, when I'm writing a fantasy and I'm writing an adult fantasy, I know that that thing is probably going to be like 600 pages, just to be realistic with myself. And so I feel like 200 pages is like a third of the book. And so I feel like that's more than enough to get a good idea of what the book would be, and the characters plus the synopsis plus the pitch letter. And so that way it puts me in a position in which I don't have to write the full book, which I might not necessarily have time for in the breadth of time in which I might want to sell something. But it also isn't so short of a proposal that I would be concerned that I might, you know, not get offers just because it's not enough material. So that's kind of my feel. So what I'm wanting to do is just kind of put that together and kind of present it to my agent and see what she thinks about it. And so that's something I'd like to do. I think especially if I'm able to get the SlugBook on submission for that plan of like June, then I'll have that other half of the year to kind of have this be the side project. But yeah, so that is essentially what I wanted to do. So what is this adult romantasy idea? So I would basically, I have vibes right now, and vibes only. That is generally what I have. But I do really like the Carissa Broadbent in the Crown of Nyaxia series, I really like the way that she structured that, in that she has like each couple basically has like a duology, but there's also an overarching sort of story throughout the full series, but then you're getting to switch couples each 2 books, and so I really like that format. I think that's really cool. She also does like novellas in between of like other different couples that then like come into the different books. Like, I love that format. I think that is so cool and so perfect. And I think for someone like me that could get bored once a couple gets together, I think it's really nice to kind of have like 2 books and have a couple get together and then move on to another one, but still get to revisit that other couple and have like this bigger story happening throughout. I think that's really, really cool. And I would love to do something like that. Which of course is making a huge amount of work for myself. You see what I mean when I talked about I want to break from series, and then I come up with something like this, which would be such an involved process. And that's also why I want to do the proposal, because I know this would be so huge, and to like do this huge plan, write the whole book, it's just, to me, at this point in my career, I do need a little bit of 50-50. I need a little bit of buy-in before I can settle the roots into that. And so that's kind of my feeling about it. But anyway, let's talk about these vibes. So I'm really looking, first of all, I'm looking for the vibes of like going into like late 20s, early 30s sort of age bracket. Like, that's what I'm interested in. I wouldn't want to do like a close, like a 20-year-old sort of thing. I just feel like my YA, especially a Master of Monsters, is like very close to that age range, and I kind of don't want to be there. I kind of want to be closer to the 30s, later in life sort of vibe. Like, that's kind of what I'm thinking about. I'm also really wanting like a sort of like a Beautiful Ruins type setting vibe. Like, this is what I mean when I say it's like 100% vibes. Like, I want like an ancient ruins, but like overgrown, like really beautiful thing. But I also kind of want like a post-apocalyptic, like Fallout vibes sort of thing. And I don't want to say steampunk, because it's not really like steampunk. I think like the Fallout vibes and steampunk, to me steampunk is a very specific thing, and I think the Fallout vibes is a little bit different. Like, I think that's a little bit more what I'm going for. So yeah, a little bit of that. I think I'm interested in like a golden retriever black cat sort of dynamic, but I also like that sort of like golden retriever that like could switch up and then like murder a bunch of people, like not in a bad not in a bad way, she says, in a protection way, you know, like that sort of thing. Enemies, bad people. I think I like those vibes. This is kind of like what I'm working with. Again, so high level, pure vibes at this point. And I do kind of like the idea of like some sort of like organization fantasy job thing. I think I'm interested in that, because I like dark academia so much, like I'm really into that vibe, but I don't because I want to do like a sort of early 30s age bracket. I don't want people going into school. But I think like a workplace vibe could be really interesting, and like that could be like a new sort of challenge for me of like really working within like a work structure organization. I'm kind of interested in that. So yeah. And I think it probably, I'll call it a romantasy, but it'll definitely be like a science fantasy, because I can't help but blend genres. At all times I must blend genres. So I think that will definitely be more of the structure. But again, purely vibes, so high level vibes at this point. I just know that I want to do that. Yes, it will be spicy. That is the goal. And I do just want to get into it, especially because I had my like time where I was really hardcore reading a lot of Romantasy, and I would like to do, I just haven't been reading much of anything, period. And so that's why I haven't gotten to be in that vein, but I really do want to be in that vein. And I do really want to create a world that doesn't feel familiar within the existing framework of like a lot of the Romantasy that I'm reading. I think I want to really do like a different sort of vibe, and I think that's why I'm leaning into that kind of like post-apocalyptic thing. Maybe also because I read that series by Elizabeth Stevens, which is like post-apocalyptic Romantasy but aliens sort of vibe, and I was like, that's so cool. Like, I think that's really cool. And so I think I want to do something with that that's like, you know, leaning a lot more fantasy. But yeah, anyway, this is what I mean, pure vibes. So that's 2026, new 2026 project. Hopefully towards the end of the year, we will see what my schedule looks like and how things kind of work out. But that is something I would love to get into working on. Finally, I do want to say that I have a secret project that I'm working on. I really can't say a lot about it at this point. But I wanted to address it because I feel like way back when I was like, oh, I might have something to share at some time, and then I didn't. So yeah, that's basically that. I did have a few things out on submission last time I did an update. So yes, something has come to fruition. Yeah, I can't really get into it at this point, but I will be working on that. I've already worked on it some in 2025, and I'll be doing some more this year as well. And at some point what that secret project is will be shared, but I think it is potentially not going to be for a while. So yeah, thank you for your patience, and I will get to that at some point. But yeah, I figured I should address it in this video just so you're aware, because there may be at some point vlogs in the future where I'm just kind of like, I'm working on a secret thing and I can't tell you about it. And that's kind of the nature of traditional publishing. So yeah, that is basically what that is. And yeah, at some point I will be able to share that with you. And that's it for the 2026 project update. I am very excited about all of these projects. I do think this year is gonna be a busy year. I think it's gonna be pretty heavy, but I also have reached this point in sort of like managing my workload where I really do like to just kind of work on one thing at a time, not overload myself. So I'm also really focusing on doing that. So, you know, there might have to be some level of prioritization. But I think what I'm really am hoping I can get that SlugBook on submission. So that's kind of my like, not my top priority, because I have things that are contracted that need to be my top priority, but I would really love to have time for that. So I think this is definitely going to be a year of like really doing a lot of moving around to manage my time as best as I possibly can. But yeah, I'm very excited about these projects, and hopefully I will have more about those things to share with you when we get to the halfway point through the year. But yeah, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you want to see me working on these projects or get more regular updates, I'll have monthly writing vlogs where I will share with you what I'm working on month to month, which is kind of the best way to keep up on a regular basis with what I'm doing. But yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.